Real genius wasn't about making nerds cool. It was about making them dangerous. Not with fists, not with firepower, with minds sharp enough to end careers, and smiles that dared you to miss it. But behind the pranks, the popcorn, the punchlines, it was a fight to keep intelligence from being sanded down. A studio push that almost dragged it into cheap sex jokes, a casting gamble that turned Val Kilmer into the movie's pulse, a floating scene cut loose before it could become legend. These are 10 weird facts about real genius, where thinking fast beat looking tough. Welcome to the lab. The punchline comes with equations. Number 1. Real genius feels weirdly clean for an 80s campus movie, and that wasn't an accident, it was a rescue mission. Early on, this project was being shaped to ride the exact wave that had just made movies like Revenge of the Nerds explode. Hollywood wanted the same recipe again. Smart kids as punchlines, horny chaos, crude gags stacked on crude gags. A slobs versus snobs party where brains were just another excuse to get sloppy. That tone was baked into the first scripts by Neil Israel and Pat Proff, the hitmakers behind Police Academy and Bachelor Party. Their early version leaned much more closer to ranch than wonder, treating genius like a gimmick instead of a worldview. On paper, it probably looked safe. The market was paying for vulgar. Then Martha Coolidge stepped in and quietly flipped the movie's spine. She didn't remove the comedy, she aimed it. The cheap sex jokes got trimmed, the characters got sharper and more human, and suddenly the laughs didn't come from mocking intelligence, they came from watching intelligent people mess up, panic, improvise, and still try to do the right thing. That pivot is why real genius doesn't feel like a relic. It still has pranks, it still has attitude, but it also has a heartbeat. Number 2. Once Martha Coolidge steered real genius away from the cheap sex comedy lane, she made a second decision that mattered just as much. If the movie was going to joke about prodigies building weapons, it couldn't treat the audience like idiots. The science had to feel earned. The world had to feel real. Otherwise, the whole thing turns into cartoon noise. And the premise was already a tightrope. Pacific Tech isn't just a quirky campus, it's a pipeline. Brilliant students get recruited to build a laser so precise it can hit a human-sized target from space. In the wrong hands, that idea becomes silly instantly. Coolidge refused to let it collapse, so she did the work. Real research, real consultants. She studied places like Caltech and MIT, talked with academic experts and people familiar with military tech culture, and built a rule for the film that never changed. Reality can bend, but it can't be lazy. The laser doesn't have to be literally possible, but the thinking behind it has to sound like something smart people would actually say in a room. That obsession shaped the details you can feel. Pacific Tech was modeled directly on Caltech. Dorm graffiti was copied from real campus walls, then embellished by actual Caltech students. Even Laszlo, the genius hiding underground, wasn't random. He echoes those long-running university legends about brilliant students vanishing into tunnels beneath elite schools. And that's why the comedy lands. The jokes aren't laughing at intelligence, they're laughing at what happens when intelligence gets used. Number 3. Real genius already had the brains. What it still needed was a heartbeat. And for a while, that heartbeat was supposed to be someone else. Early on, the role of Chris Knight leaned toward John Cusack. He had the tone, the cool, the timing. But Cusack passed, choosing to do Better Off Dead instead. And suddenly, this smart comedy had a problem no amount of research could solve. Without the right Chris, the movie turns into math homework with punchlines. Then Val Kilmer walked in and did something most actors would never risk in an audition. He didn't try to charm the room, he tried to dominate it. Producer Brian Grazer introduced himself and offered a handshake. Kilmer looked him over and said, "Sorry, but you look like you're 12. I like to work with men." It sounds like career suicide, one of those lines that should get you politely escorted out. But it didn't, because it wasn't random arrogance. It was a live demonstration of the character. Chris Knight isn't impressed by titles. He doesn't perform respect just because someone expects it. He disarms authority by treating it like it's already lost. Kilmer wasn't reading Chris Knight, he was being him right there in the room before the movie even existed. That's what won it. Grazer didn't see an actor trying to please him. He saw the proof that this movie could have a lead who felt untouchable, effortlessly smarter than everyone around him, dangerous in the calmest possible way. And that energy followed him onto set. Even early in his career, Kilmer had that detached, self-contained vibe. Not loud, not chaotic, just unreachable, which could have been a problem, except it fit Chris Knight perfectly. The distance reads as intelligence, the lack of nice reads as confidence, the refusal to beg for approval becomes the joke and the weapon. Put him against William Atherton's controlled, smug Professor Hathaway, and you get the film's best dynamic. Atherton plays power like it's sacred. Kilmer treats it like background noise. Number 4. Laszlo Hollyfeld's unlimited entry stunt in Real Genius plays like the kind of genius prank only a movie would dare. 1,000,000+ submissions, a contest drowning under paper, a kid quietly breaking the system with math and obsession. It feels too extreme to be real, except it was real. The movie didn't invent that loophole, it borrowed it. Years before the film, Caltech students had already figured out the same weakness. If a promotion doesn't cap entries, it's not a contest, it's a vending machine with a broken lock. In the late 1960s, students used early computers to mass-produce submissions for snack and food giveaways, targeting promotions that were basically begging to be exploited. And then the idea leveled up. In 1975, 3 programmers went after a McDonald's contest using an IBM computer system, generating roughly 1.2 million entries and flooding Southern California with them. The payoff wasn't mythical either. They reportedly pulled in about $10,000 out of 50,000 total prizes, a huge slice of the entire pool. The fallout hit fast. Complaints, embarrassment, promotions getting tightened. Unlimited entry stopped being cute and started being dangerous. So when Laszlo runs the scam, it isn't just comedy, it's a warning shot, because the punchline isn't that he's crazy, it's that the rules were. Number 5. Michelle May Rinks Jordan isn't just the quirky one in Real Genius. She's a jolt of electricity in human form, hyperactive, sleep-deprived, mechanically gifted, and so genuinely thrilled by ideas that her brain seems to sprint ahead of her mouth. In an era full of one-note teen comedy girls, Jordan lands as something rarer, a woman whose intelligence isn't a prop, it's the engine, the joke, the charm, and then the movie ends. But Jordan doesn't. Years later, Chippendale Rescue Rangers writer-producer Tad Stones confirmed the quiet ripple effect. Jordan helped inspire Gadget Hackwrench, and once you hear that, it snaps into place. The goggles energy, the joyful tinkering, the curiosity that turns into invention. A brilliant hands-on creator whose smarts feel warm and alive, not icy or superior. So Jordan didn't just steal scenes in a cult comedy, she became a blueprint, one performance echoing into a Disney icon decades later. Not bad for a genius running on caffeine, chaos, and pure invention. Number 6. Before Real Genius ever found its Mitch Taylor, the filmmakers flirted with a casting idea that sounds almost too perfect to be real. They briefly considered hiring an actual prodigy, a teenager who'd already graduated college at 14 and was heading toward law school. On paper, he was Mitch, a living headline, a walking genius kid story. Then reality hit. He couldn't act, so the role went to Gabriel Jarrett, and that normal casting choice accidentally stitched Real Genius into the DNA of the Karate Kid universe in the strangest way. Years later, Jarrett pops up again in The Karate Kid Part 3 as the bully Daniel LaRusso knocks out, which is hilarious in hindsight, because Mitch in Real Genius is basically anxiety in human form, the overwhelmed kid, the pressure cooker, the last person you picture getting flattened in a tournament movie. And it doesn't stop there. Real Genius also has Yuji Akamoto as Fenton, one of Pacific Tech's intense orbiting competitors. Not long after, Akamoto becomes chosen in The Karate Kid Part 2, then returns decades later in Cobra Kai, dragging that whole legacy back into the spotlight. Even Cobra Kai gets a little suspicious. It introduces characters named Chris and Mitch, and fans have long clocked it as the kind of deep-cut nod the show loves to sneak in. And Jarrett's real life takes the quietest turn of all. After acting, he became an advocate for the deaf community and went on to work as a sign language interpreter, a surprisingly grounded ending for a guy most people remember as stressed-out genius kid. So a failed attempt to cast a real prodigy didn't just change one role, it opened a weird little hallway between two cult worlds, and it's still echoing. Number 7. One of Real Genius's most legendary moments is the one most people didn't see in theaters. In a fully shot, deleted scene, Chris Knight floats outside a classroom, casually lounging in a chair that's being carried by a cluster of helium balloons. Students stare up from below like they're watching a prank turn into magic. And the wild part is, it wasn't a rumor or a sketch, it was real production work. Wires, stunt planning, the whole thing. It even played in test screenings and showed up in early trailers, which is why fans swear they remember it. Then the movie hit theaters and the scene was gone. No official reason was ever stamped on it, but the most believable explanation is also the simplest. Someone panicked about copycats. Teen audiences, helium balloons, a stunt that looks easy to imitate, the kind of gag that could turn from funny to dangerous fast, and yet it never truly disappeared. Some TV airings and certain home releases quietly put it back, which only made the scene grow bigger in fan memory, a missing moment that became part of the movie's mythology. Number 8. That popcorn ending looks like a goofy victory lap. In reality, it was a logistical nightmare dressed up as joy, because the hard part wasn't popcorn, it was enough popcorn to bury a house and still read on camera like a tidal wave. The crew spent months popping it just to build the first mountain, and even after all that time, it still wasn't enough. They had to bring in outside suppliers to deliver more because the shot demanded a ridiculous volume that ordinary production tricks couldn't fake. Then the safety problems kicked in. Popcorn was going to rain down near hot lights, wiring, and equipment, so it had to be treated with fire retardant. That prevented one disaster and created another. If wildlife got into it, especially birds, the treated popcorn could hurt them, so the crew had to cover it, guard it, and control the area like they were protecting evidence. And the house wasn't some real neighborhood home either. It was a build meant to be sacrificed, set up in an area where construction was happening. Because once they released the popcorn, there was no clean reset. The timing had to hit, the flow had to hit, the camera had to catch it because you don't get a second take on gravity. Years later, Mythbusters tested the idea and basically confirmed what your brain already knows. Popcorn won't smash a house the way the movie shows, but the satisfying part is they also proved the core science isn't nonsense. Lasers really can popcorn. So the scene cheats on scale, not on spirit. It's absurd, dangerous, weirdly precise, and just believable enough to feel like it almost could happen. And once you've seen it, that song will never sound the same again. Number 9. In 1985, promoting a movie online sounded like something a screenwriter would cut for being too unrealistic. No websites, no social media, no viral trailers. Most people didn't even have a home computer worth bragging about, and the word internet still felt like a rumor. But Real Genius went there anyway. About a week before release, director Martha Coolidge and members of the cast took part in what was essentially an online press conference staged inside a computer store in Westwood, California. Instead of reporters flying in or calling on a landline, journalists from around the country sent questions electronically through CompuServe, one of the earliest consumer online services. Text crawled in, answers crawled back. Slow, clunky, gloriously futuristic. And here's the wild part. It actually worked. Questions arrived digitally, responses happened in real time. A Hollywood movie was being sold through a network instead of a phone, a fax machine, or a traditional press junket. By today's standards, it looks primitive. In 1985, it was basically magic. There's still debate over whether it was the first time a film did this, but it's widely treated as one of the earliest examples, a prototype for the online promo machine that would eventually become normal. And it fits the movie perfectly. A film about brainy kids and experimental tech didn't just predict the future, it quietly stepped into it first. Number 10. The timing is insane. Real Genius hit theaters on August 7, 1985. Weird Science landed on August 2nd. Same week, same teen audience, same science comedy lane. 2 movies released 5 days apart, like Hollywood accidentally dared them to fight for the same brains. But they don't even speak the same language. Weird Science treats science like a wish machine. Press a button, reality bends, you get what you want. The joke is the freedom. Real Genius treats science like something that can actually work, which makes it scarier. The laughs come from pressure, ego, ethics, and the quiet dread of realizing your cool project might end up in the wrong hands. The box office reflected that difference. Weird Science grabbed the bigger headline with around $39 million. Real Genius made about $13 million on an $8 million budget. Solid, but not loud, not instant legend. And then the years flipped the scoreboard. Real Genius kept getting discovered, quoted, and rewatched because it has heart under the IQ. It doesn't just sell a fantasy, it tells the truth with a grin. In 2014, a TV adaptation was announced through Sony Television and Happy Madison, like the industry wanted to bottle that vibe again, but it never really materialized, and that failure is its own proof. You can copy the premise, you can't mass-produce the spark. 2 films entered the same week, only one became a cult that refuses to die. Bonus fact: Real Genius sold itself with 2 very different poster vibes. One put Chris Knight next to Einstein, basically saying, yes, he's a genius, just with sarcasm and bad decisions. It's a hilarious promise, especially since Einstein never shows up in the film for the extremely simple reason that he'd been dead for decades. The other poster went full chaos, with Chris posed like a human prank in progress against a towering city backdrop. Less future scientist, more walking trouble with an IQ. Then home video arrived and somehow made the marketing weirder. One later DVD cover uses a Val Kilmer photo that looks subtly wrong. The face feels stretched, smoothed, and slightly distorted, like the designer discovered Photoshop and panicked. It's not scary, but it's unsettling in a way you can't unsee. So here's the perfect irony. The movie is about brilliant minds solving problems with precision, and somewhere in marketing, a genius approved that face and walked away like it was normal. That's what happens when a movie this smart gets marketed just a little sideways. If Real Genius still pulls you back into that mix of brains, sarcasm, and controlled chaos, you can bring it home by checking the links below for the DVD or 4K. Thanks for the support, it really means a lot. Now let's get back to the experiment. By the end, Real Genius doesn't feel like an 80s comedy that got lucky. It feels like a movie that refused to be dumbed down. It let smart characters stay smart. It let the jokes come from truth instead of cheap tricks. And it turned lasers, burnout, and college pressure into something strangely hopeful. Because beneath the sarcasm and the synths, it understood something real. That being brilliant doesn't make you invincible. It just means you feel everything faster. So if this one still lives in your memory, drop a comment. Tell us the moment you still quote and what classic we should crack open next. Because in the real world, genius isn't always shiny. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's exhausted, and sometimes it buries a monster under popcorn and calls it justice.